Hey y'all, JaemiO here, and it's FoodieRant Day. So FoodieRant is a segment I do every Tuesday. You can find out more about it on Patreon. I'll put a link here so you can learn more about it and all the videos I do, full details and things like that. Before we get started, I just want to say if you like this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up at the end. And then also, if you'd like to see more from me, please click subscribe and go ahead and click the little bell so you get all the notifications of what I'm doing, and that way you won't miss anything. So, this is the first foodie rant, and I took a lot of time trying to figure out what I was going to talk about. I wanted the first one to be a really good one, and I wanted to think of something that was pretty universal that would be something that we're definitely going to be, I don't know, in some way talking about all the way through this journey, this food journey that we're on together. And so what I decided on was hunger. Hunger is something that I'm pretty passionate about, and hopefully resolving or helping to resolve. It goes along with food. So obviously, lack of food equals hunger. Hunger is something that touches every one of our lives, whether you realize it or not. So we think about hunger, we think about, you can think about it in two ways. Either you can think, oh, I'm hungry right now, and we don't always realize how privileged we are, because there are people, which obviously we know, out there who don't have access to food like we do. They can't just go in their kitchen and find something to eat, or they can't just go to the store and purchase something to eat. And something that I find interesting about the hunger problem is that it's not exactly what we think of it as. So, and when you think of hunger, you think we need to create more food. We always hear we need to create more food. And something I find interesting is that most farmers, at least a lot of the ones that I know and met and have talked to, think that they are really helping the food problem by raising more food, especially commodity crops. So commodity crops meaning corn, soybeans, wheat, rice, things like that. Even pork, beef, obviously milk would be a beef product, but milk as well. And we hear all the time you need more protein, you need more calcium in your diet. And a lot of those ads that we see on TV are actually sponsored by commodity checkoff boards. So their goal is basically to increase sales for those products. So we think milk, build strong bones, or even protein to help build strong bones or keep a healthy body. But in reality, a lot of those, or actually all of those ads, are not geared towards fixing a problem of not having the food available, but to increase sales. So with that said, when it comes to the world food problem, or world hunger problem, a lot of times farmers think, okay, well, I'm raising this food and making the problem, or I'm helping to resolve the problem, and and the reality is the problem is not that we need more food in the system. We need to figure out a better way to distribute the food. So if you search anything about food distribution or the world hunger problem, you're going to find a few things that say we need more food. Normally those are kind of sponsored articles, but the real problem is actually distribution. And so what's the issue? So when we think about hunger, I think a lot of times we think about folks in other countries. We don't necessarily think about our next door neighbor, or someone we know from school or someone we know from work. But really, hunger is a problem universally, not just in some other country, but in our own. And so I think our biggest way of trying to resolve that problem has been to create things like food banks, or even like meal programs. And also things like food stamps. So now that's known as SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And so while those things are great, like their intent is wonderful, they don't really tackle the problem. And so I'll give this example. So I grew up needing to depend on things like, or my family needing to depend on things like the free lunch program, reduced lunch program, and food banks. And truthfully, those things really, really helped But sometimes, and actually a lot of times, you would get things that you had no idea what to do with. Um, and so I didn't really think about it until I was an adult, and is seeing people that I know who still rely on those programs. A lot of times they'll get things that you or I might think, hey, that's pretty easy to use, and they're like, oh, I have no idea how to use that, and it'll get thrown away. Sometimes you'll get people who will give it to someone else, but if you figure you have a person who has no idea how to use, say, broccoli rabe, they don't know what it is, never seen it before, you might get someone who looks up how to use it, but more times than not, it gets tossed away. And the thought process behind that is not that they want to be wasteful, but they have no idea how to use it, what it is. You go to a food bank, you're getting a random box of food. You're not getting like labels of what it is, and then the person that you may know that may need it, they probably have no idea what it is either. So there's that, and then the other issue is time. A lot of people that I've come in contact with through my own food journey is that they don't have the time to fix something from scratch. So if they're getting a bunch of fresh fruits and vegetables, that's great. But if it's not something like apples or oranges or bananas, it's not something they really have time to fix. So I'm not saying we need to start giving people who need food assistance a bunch of pre-made meals. What I'm saying is that there needs to be education to go along with it. Um, there's been quite a few programs that have come about that have actually found that if they have a food education program go along with their food distribution program, so say a church food bank, they're giving away a box of food to a family every week or a couple times a week, but they also have a class that these folks can attend, then you'll see people using those fresh fruits and vegetables, starting to understand what they can do. And not only what they can do, but that it doesn't necessarily always take a lot of time to create a full meal. Sometimes when we're thinking about making food, we're thinking like, well, we have to have like a main entree, and a side dish, and then a starch, and a bread. And you don't really have to have all that. But a lot of people, like, that's what they're used to, that's what they see, and they don't necessarily know and understand it. Yes, they may know how to cook, but they might not have the time or means or understanding to really realize there's several different ways of cooking. So I said I was giving this example. So when we depended on things like food banks, I remember one summer in particular, we had so many apricots. And so this was back when, and I don't know if they still do this. I don't think so, but they may. When they would have like a surplus of food, and the state would actually label their own cans. So you get a very basic looking can, and it would just say whatever was in it. It didn't have any nutrition facts on it, at least not that I remember. Nothing about it. It just had like a little picture of the food and the name. So we had like a whole pantry full of apricots. And nobody in my household ate apricots. And honestly, I had no idea what an apricot even was. And so we got towards the end of the summer, and I swear I felt like I was starving. Probably wasn't, but I really felt like I was starving. And we had 50 cans of apricots, and I think I ate apricots every day that week, just straight out of the can. I had no idea what it was. Internet then, I mean, like, there was internet, but it wasn't kind of like now where like first instinct is to go look it up. I was just hungry, and I was a teenager, and I needed something to eat, and I do not really like apricots now. The first couple times it was like, oh, these are pretty good, and then after that it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of eating these. But case in point, that was a bunch of food that if I hadn't actually gone in there and eaten it because I was so hungry, it probably would have never gotten used in our house. And honestly, I feel like it was underutilized because it was just eating them straight out of the can. So what's the point of all this? So hunger. Um, I think that things like SNAP, so things like the food stamp program, started out with a great idea. So not the food stamp program that we know of today, but the one that originated under FDR. So President Roosevelt basically created the food stamp program to do two things. One, it helped farmers to get some money for surplus crops. And two, it helped American families to excuse me, to be able to have something to eat. So the food stamp funds, so family would receive food stamp funds just like they do now, and that money can only be used towards U.S. produced surplus crops. So that way it started getting the money rolling back into the system and circulating back into the system, and also filling stomachs. So you would get whatever the surplus was, say it was corn. So, corn was at the grocery store, the family could buy it with their food stamps, problem solved. What a lot of people have issues with the SNAP program of today is that people can buy things like chips and candy and soda. And on the one hand, I do think that's kind of, I don't want to say wrong, but it's kind of odd that it's okay to buy things like junk food, or what we consider junk food, um, with a government funded program, instead of only being able to buy things like. However, at the same time, who are we to say that you can't purchase what you want with your money? It's not fair that you can't eat junk food just because someone else is paying for it. That's it's an autonomy issue. I think it's just wrong that you can't say what a person can or can't eat. But I do fully understand the other side of that argument. And so I don't agree with that part of the food stamp program, but there are other parts of it that I think are completely awesome. So for an example, started my farmers market project going on 3 years ago. Wow. And what I learned in doing that, so our store actually accepts SNAP as a form of payment, but what I learned through doing the farmers market project was that you can actually use food stamp money or SNAP money to purchase supplies to grow a garden. So basically that means that, like, they can't buy like garden hoses or something like that, but a person who receives SNAP funds can get things like seed and soil, and they can be able to grow their own food. And so the issue then becomes, well, I don't have a lawn. Well, actually, so I've been doing balcony gardening for the past, I guess 2-3 years, going on 3 years, something like that. And some things do better than others, but the point is that you can really save a ton of money and really be able to feed your family better by spending $20 on, say, seed and soil versus spending $20 on groceries. I mean, truly, I think last year I spent maybe $50 total on gardening supplies, and really, we don't buy a lot of groceries. We don't have to buy a lot of groceries other than things like eggs or bread, which really, if we took the time, we could really make our own bread. But, it saves a lot of money. Being able to grow your own food, you can have stuff to freeze, you can have stuff to can, and then we go back to this whole time thing. So, one advantage to balcony gardening or gardening in container gardening, is that you don't have to worry as much about weeds and working the land or anything like that, because you simply won't have that problem. But talking to people, I haven't met people who receive SNAP funds, and even people who help on the distribution end, so people who work in the industry, that actually knew that that was something that you can purchase with that money. So getting back to hunger, the problem is not so much that we don't have food. I talked about being able to grow your own food, and that's absolutely wonderful. But even if people didn't grow their own food, they could actually, if there was a way to make sure every person got the food that was out there, we wouldn't even have a problem. We wouldn't have to increase production. We wouldn't have to really worry about the food these food distribution models, things like SNAP, things like food banks and things like that. Or maybe those are the answers. Maybe those are the ways that we can get food out there to the system. I don't know. I'm interested, so please comment below. Let me know what you think about this problem. But long story short, it's not that people don't have enough food to eat. It's that they don't know how to cook it. They don't know how to effectively shop, because one thing I see a lot in our store is that people, so they see something cheap, like they see like $1 salad. okay, you have $1 pre-made salad. That's great. That's awesome. That's probably in your budget. When you think about it, you can get a whole head of lettuce for $1. Probably cheaper. And then you could make at least 4 salads out of that versus getting the one salad. So a lot of it is just not understanding how to spend your money wisely, how to shop for foods, and how to prepare your own foods. And with that, distributing the foods. I mean, if we calculated all the food that gets wasted from grocery stores that doesn't get sold, and then also, I mean, and there are some that will donate that food to food organizations like food banks or soup kitchens and things like that, and that's great. That food doesn't go wasted. But there's also things um, like when you foods that don't fit the perfect food model. So something I learned my first year of college was I went gleaning with a group, and it was so eye-opening to me because I didn't realize that we went gleaning for potatoes, and I didn't realize that there's so many potatoes, and not just potatoes. I've learned since then it's a lot of food that, but potatoes that get left behind because they're not, the perfect size or perfect shape or or something like that. They don't look like what retailers want. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I think that really speaks to our society. I mean, people often say, well, he or she doesn't look like this, so I don't think they're worth whatever. We're doing the same thing to our food. How ridiculous is that? Something that is rich in nutrition content, we're saying it's not good enough because it's not pretty enough. That's crazy. So something to check out with that is the Ugly Fruits and Vegetables Project, which has some really good commercials. And basically what they're trying to do is to reduce those foods, and reduce the price of those foods and get people to understand that, that ugly tomato tastes exactly like the pretty tomato. And so it helps to reduce food waste, helps to get more food into the system and distribute it better. But as far as being able to get the food that say, like, something that's always interested me is like food that say buffets throw away, or restaurants throw away. There's so many food laws that they're there to protect us, but at the same time sometimes they hinder us. And so the interesting thing about food safety laws is since their inception they haven't reduced foodborne illness at all. So it's great that we have these things to protect us from foodborne illness, but at the same time they're not protecting us from sickness. So anyway, hunger is our first topic. I feel like I kind of covered a lot of things. I don't want this video to go on and on. This may be the longest video I do, but I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, if you liked it, and if you want to see more, please consider subscribing and click the bell notification so that you can be informed of when everything is going, or be informed of when new videos come up. And also check out Patreon so you can see the full schedule of videos that and last but not least, today's video is brought to you by my patrons on Patreon. So a very special thank you to you all, and I'll see you next time.